Hi everyone! For this week's cosplay make-along video, I'll show you how I made my blaster holder, and then we'll see the whole cosplay all together, and I'll tell you a bit about how much it cost for me to make and all the details about the finished product. So I started making the blaster holder by creating a template. So using a manila folder and the blaster itself, I'm going to trace the blaster onto the manila folder. So I'm going to do that on both sides so that I have kind of a symmetrical tracing of each side of the blaster, starting along the line in the fold in the middle of the folder. So now that I have the outline of the blaster itself traced out, I'm going to freehand the shape of the blaster holder. So I want to make sure that it's big enough that it will cover and that the blaster can slip in and out easily. So I want to make sure to give enough allowance on both sides for that. So now I'm sketching out the top part that will make the belt loops in, and that's how it will hang from the hip. And then coming around to sketch the front part that will be the actual pocket for the blaster. So before I cut out, I'm just gonna make sure that it looks like my template will fit. Now you can see why the fold in the manila folder is helpful for this part. And now I'm gonna cut along those lines that I hand drew. If before this step you want to erase the lines that you traced around the blaster, if you think that's going to be confusing when you cut, you can do that. And just gonna measure it one last time, and as you can see, it looks like the front side is a little too short, so we'll have to take that out when we trace it onto the foam. So for this project, I'm using black craft foam or EVA foam. The thin kind of craft foam is usually what's referred to as craft foam, and some other types of foam are referred to as EVA foam. So you can find this at the craft store, the craft section of any store. They sell it in all different sizes. I bought a big sheet to make sure that this project would fit on it. And now I'm just tracing around my template. The nice thing about EVA foam when you trace it is that it makes a little indent in the foam, so even when you're working on black you can see what you traced. And I'm just bringing it out a little bit so it's big enough. And I'm gonna measure one last time. And then I'm going to cut out my foam. can set that scrap aside for another project. And so now I'm just going to make sure that my seams line up. Trim off any excess that might be sticking out, like that corner there. Throughout this, I'll be trimming as I go, so that the blaster holder is the exact shape that I want. So now that I have the seam lined up correctly while the blaster is still in there, I'm going to use these paper clips to hold that seam together. The paper clips did make a little bit of an indent in the foam, but it ended up being not that noticeable in the end product, and I thought it kind of gave it a leather distressed look. So now that those paper clips are holding it in place, after I do a little bit more trimming, I am going to glue it together with the super glue. You can use hot glue, but hot glue doesn't have as much lasting power on foam. Where you glue with hot glue tends to be very weak and will rip. But the super glue will be a little bit stronger of a hold. It still can't be too rough with the blaster holder, but it should at least stay together when we wear it. So one paper clip at a time, I will remove the paper clip, super glue that section, and then move on to the next clip. Might have to hold down for a couple seconds and wait for the super glue to adhere, but that should happen pretty quickly.
You're welcome.
And now I'm going to go along the edge of that seam with the super glue just to make sure that it has some extra holding power. And then you just wait for that to dry. And now I'm going to measure the belt loop holes and cut those. So I take the belt, line it up with that edge, trace along the top and bottom edge, then I'm going to connect those lines, but we're only going to cut the vertical lines. gonna fold it over so that I can cut out those belt loops with one cut. Had to open up one side a little bit, and the belt slips right through. So once I clear my work area, I'm gonna apply a layer of Mod Podge, which is like it's like a paste, but it also can be used as kind of like a lacquer or clear coat on things. It's what I use it for a lot. So since it's already black, the foam that I used, all I'll have to do is apply this layer of Mod Podge to give it a shinier look, so it looks less like foam and more like leather or some other material that this pouch would be made out of. If you use a different color foam, I would recommend that you apply one layer of Mod Podge, as many layers as paint as you need to apply to provide full coverage, and then another layer of Mod Podge, and that should give you the same shiny finish that you want. So this will dry clear, but you have to be careful about paint strokes or brush strokes because those will show up. So I'm trying to make all of the brush strokes as long as I can and even, so that there are as little brush strokes as possible. Also, if you wanted a really faux leather look with EVA foam before this step, you can blast your EVA foam piece with a heat gun, and that will seal up all the pores in the EVA foam and make a really smooth surface for you to apply the Mod Podge to. But I didn't do that for this particular piece. You want to make sure you just are applying a thin layer. You don't want it to be too thick. And we just want to apply this to anywhere that will be showing when we wear the cosplay. So you don't have to go crazy about the inside, but the bottom and maybe a little bit of the bottom of the inside I did. And then of course, the top. And you want to let this layer dry and then do the same layer of Mod Podge on the back side. So here is the finished product without the poncho. So as a reminder, the pants, the vest, the shirt, and the belt were all purchased specifically for this cosplay. Oh, and the blaster prop, of course. The boots I already had, and the wig I purchased from a cosplay wig site. And then I did the side bias tape detail on the pants. I ended up doing with hem adhesive, which is sometimes called stitch witchery. So it's a iron-on stitching instead of hand sewing. So that's also another option if you don't want to sew for this cosplay. And then here is it with the poncho, which I did end up doing some touch-up paint job too in between making these videos. So the total cost for this cosplay was $242.82. But as I've said in previous videos, if you're using clothing you already own or shopping secondhand for your clothing, that would probably eliminate a lot of that costs, because I spent $62.75 on just materials to add to the clothing. So the paint, the bias tape, materials for the blaster holder. The majority of the money that I spent on this cosplay was buying the clothing new and the wig and the wig accessories. So thank you everyone for watching this series, and I can't wait to see all of your awesome costumes on Halloween and in our costume contest.